Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, and welcome everyone to Caregiver Solutions Info. I'd like to wish everyone a happy new year. And if you're a caregiver and this new year is not starting out so happy for you, then you've come to the right place. This show is for you, the family caregiver. Whether you're caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease or some other related dementia, this is the place where you can find information and advice and tips to help you along the way your caregiving journey. So I'm glad that you decided to tune in today, whether you're joining us on the internet, live stream, or whether you're local here in South Florida and you're listening on the radio. We are live from Boca Raton, Florida, and it is a new year. With the new year, we all have resolutions. We all have things we want to maybe do differently. We all have things that maybe we want to learn. We have goals, and this is the place to start new. So if you're a caregiver, why don't we have an open mind and listen to our guest today, and she is going to help us learn new ways to do things in the new year. Consider this. Have you ever visited a sick friend, or you have a family member who's not well, whether it's because they have depression, maybe they have memory loss, and you really dread visiting them because you don't know what to say and you don't know what to do? What if, as a caregiver, you think about this concept, joy in the journey of caregiving? It's not an oxymoron, but is it really possible? How can you find joy in the journey? And if so, how do you do it? Also, how about this concept? Graceful Alzheimer's care. Again, a lot of things to consider, and you wonder, I'm not really sure about that. Is that possible? Well, I'm here today to tell you that it is possible, and today's guest is an expert in dementia care. Matter of fact, she has over 40 years experience with caregiving and dementia. She started at a young age, and she'll tell us about that. And she went on to write 2 books about caregiving. And we're going to be talking to her today about her expertise and about the experiences that she's had along the way and why she is called Dr. Kate. Now, Dr. Kate is Dr. Kate McCarty. She has a PhD. She's not a medical doctor. And her quest for helping caregivers is phenomenal because she has a real passion for this. And I've personally met Dr. Kate. She's a wonderful human being. And she does lectures around the country. She is an expert in her field. She has the heart for the caregiving and for caregivers. And so I'm going to be talking to Dr. Kate today about her 2 books and about these topics and see what she can share with us. So without further ado, we'll see if Dr. Kate is on the line. She's going to be joining us via telephone from Tampa, Florida. Dr. Kate, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good evening, Marcia. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. What an opportunity.
Well, we have a picture of you up on our screen for the people that are watching us on their computer, and it's a lovely picture of you with a little girl. Who is that little girl?
That is my beautiful granddaughter, Quinn.
Pretty
Quinn
name.
Nora. Yeah, she's quite the pistol. She lives in Maryland. So we had been up for Thanksgiving, and that was one of our little joy spots.
Well, I know she's the joy in your life, and you're very happy in the picture being with your granddaughter, and I know you're a happy person anyway. So we have your picture up here for everyone to see that can watch us via the internet. You are unique, and I say that because you started out on this journey a long time ago. You're not that old, but you still have 40 years of experience with caregiving. Tell us how you got started in this.
I got started when I was 16. My family had moved to a very rural setting in Maryland, and there were two jobs that were available for a 16-year-old. And the first summer, I went to do the cup factory, and I packed paper cups all summer. And I was pretty well convinced that perhaps I wanted to try the other job, which was the nursing home. Back then, it was the 70s. We did not have a whole lot of regulation. We had very little training. There was nothing like a certification for being a nurse's aide. You were given a washcloth and a towel, and you were told those 20 people were yours. So it was pretty much trial by fire, and we have come a long way since then.
Well, I was going to say much different today.
Come far,
right?
I wish it were a lot different. It's not a lot different, but it is some different. Yes.
Well, we get a little more training for home health aides and for nurses' assistants. A little bit more training and guidance these days than back then. But you started out and you found that obviously you like caring for people.
Yes, and I always felt like I never had I didn't know any of my grandparents. So in a way, it was I think it was a novel age group for me, and very nurturing. You do so little and you get so much in return, and that's I think what I learned at 16. And I did nurses aide work throughout my college years. And then when I started having children, I switched to activities. So I have become kind of a quality of life advocate, forerunner. I'm all about, it's not just about quantity of life, but it's about quality. Because you can see a lot of quantity, but that doesn't mean it's very valuable or the person's having much fun.
That's
I'm not always sure that person there would choose this if they had been given a choice,
Right.
So
I mentioned that
the best of both worlds.
Right. And I mentioned that you have your PhD and it's in aging studies with a focus on dementia.
Yes.
And why focus on dementia?
Well, again, my experience when I started in the nursing home in it was Manchester, Maryland. They sent me upstairs, and upstairs is where all the folks with dementia were. And of course, back then, that's all we knew is that they had dementia. There wasn't any other diagnosis. And I've always had a passion for people with dementia. Really, since then. Flash forward, I moved to a more up and coming Westminster, Maryland nursing home the next summer, and just constant reinforcement that you can reach these people with simple things. And one of my first examples was a black-eyed Susan, which is the Maryland state flower. Of course, long story about black-eyed Susans. They don't usually bloom around the Preakness time. So it's always for a native Marylander, a black-eyed Susan is very significant. And it grows in the wild on the banks of the roads, etc. So on the way to work one day, I stopped and picked a black-eyed Susan for this really cantankerous woman that was very difficult to work with, and of course had the label dementia. And just giving her that flower made her entire day better, which is sort of how I ended up with my first book, which is The Feathering Your Nest, Creating a Blueprint for Comfort.
Well,
because there are these windows where we can reach through all the plaques and tangles or Lewy bodies or whatever the diagnosis is, and we make this connection. And it's often a sensory connection. So that visual cue of that flower made all the difference for her. It wouldn't have been the same if it was a carnation. It was because it was a black-eyed Susan.
Right, and you knew what was going to really make her smile, and you knew what she was going to relate to. And it really wasn't hard. It was just knowing what she was going to like and how to reach the part of her within that was going to bring back that special memory to her. And you did it.
So true, yes. Yeah, and a lot of it is trial by error. I mean, I was still, I was only 18, so I wasn't all that astute and wise. But I knew that she had spoken of flowers, and so I saw a free one, and I popped and picked it and brought it to her.
So sometimes it's...
So, there's some trial and error, but the workbook really helps. And one of the things, I wrote this workbook when I was going for my master's degree, and I have a master's degree from a little college in Maryland called Hood. It used to be an all-girls college. And I have a master's in thanatology, which is the study of death and dying. The Greek god Thanos, that's why it's called thanatology. And this was kind of my master's project with this book. And it's what a thanatologist or a social worker would know. It's a psychosocial advance directive. That's not something you could really market well. So it's a blueprint for comfort.
Okay.
But it's the idea that there are so many preferences that each of us have. And I guess the point I wanted to get to is that at that time when I wrote the book, I'd been married 22 years, and I could not have filled the book out for my husband of 22 years. I didn't know what his preferences were. So this gives you an opportunity to really put down what your preferences are, or to do it as a family and say, hey, if you give Granny this one or that one, which one does she seem to respond to? She may be in late-stage dementia, but if she responds to it, how about you let us all in on that clue so that when I visit, I know that I want a butterscotch in my pocket, not a peppermint.
Wow. So you're not talking about preferences of end of life. You're talking about normal preferences of people throughout their life, with just what do they like to eat? What's their favorite color? What do they like to do?
Yes. Because when we lose the ability to communicate, either because of a stroke or because of maybe massive depression. It could be simply that. I mean, you can communicate, but you're not willing to, maybe. Or because of a diagnosis of some type of dementia. How can I reach through to you? How can I make your life more comfortable? How can I make your life have quality?
And that's what it's all about, of course.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Quality of life. And so this workbook is actually a tool for caregivers and others who want to be prepared to know how to help a person when they really maybe can't help themselves.
Yes.
Well, I think that's great, because we all need tools. We all need things to help us as caregivers to know what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And so I like this idea that you actually have a working tool. And when we come back from our first quick commercial break, Dr. Kate is going to explain more about this workbook in her new publication. It's called Feathering Your Nest, and we want to hear more about that. So stay tuned. We will be right back.
Arden Court.
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Wandering is a common problem for people with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's also a problem for family members who care for them. Keeping them safe and secure means never letting your guard down. And even though deep down you know it's time, it hurts to have to ask for help. But it could hurt them even more if you didn't. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a
CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're back, and joining me today via telephone from Tampa, Florida, is Dr. Kate McCarty. Dr. Kate has a PhD in aging studies with a focus on dementia, and she's written a book called Feathering Your Nest, Creating a Blueprint for Comfort. So we're talking to Dr. Kate about what this means. So Dr. Kate, you have a workbook, and this workbook is for caregivers to know how to comfort someone when they're not feeling good, when they have dementia, maybe they're depressed, whatever their situation might be. So what is exactly in the book that's going to help us give comfort to someone?
I've broken it into what I call six senses. I have learned through practice and all the years of experience that we do respond to a spirituality as well as our vision, hearing, taste, et cetera, et cetera. So I go with six senses, and I've broken the book up in that way. And I discuss some of the stories of why, cogent memories of people who have responded well to a smell or to a taste, or, like I said, to the flower. But also the spirituality piece is so important. So we have all six. And there's some real basic things that are very things that activities people think of, but they're very important for us as caregivers. And that is, it's really important if I'm going to put something on your tray or bring something in and I want you to reach for it, I want to know what your dominant hand is, because that's very important to know which side you're more likely to respond to, provided there wasn't a stroke on that side.
Right.
That's an example, but so dominant hand, and we all have a dominant sense, and that's really important to know as well. And from the negative viewpoint, let me explain. My dominant sense is a sense of smell, and a certain smell could drive me completely bonkers. Let's see, let me give you a more recent example. We just toured some recreational vehicles, brand new ones, and the formaldehyde outgassing, which I know, that's not everybody even knows what that is, but it was so
that chemical
irritating.
smell.
I had to get out. Yeah, it's a chemical. I had to get out, flashback 20 years. We were in a hotel where they had used Pine Sol, and some people think Pine Sol is a wonderful smell, but for me, I had to get out. I think we left at 3:30 in the morning because it was just that irritating. And why would that be important? Well, if I'm that little old lady or even young lady who has early onset or has Alzheimer's or really a plethora of diagnoses, I may be the one that's acting out or having behaviors, and it might be as simple as there's a smell. Smells are really important to me, and I'm acting out over that smell. So when I train caregivers, professional and family, I have to look at the entire environmental situation. Was there a particular smell? Was there a particular scene? What did it sound like? What did it look like? How confusing was it? Because we get confused with senses, and sometimes we get irritated with senses. Sometimes, for me, I love the smell of creosote. It makes me think of under the boardwalk at Bethany Beach, Delaware. But a lot of people don't think creosote is anything more than another chemical smell, right?
Right. So
So
if
to
you
keep
like,
some of that out.
right. So let's say that maybe when you grew up, you were around horses a lot and you had the smell of the grass, the dirt, the leather of the saddle, and that was good memories for you. So that as you got older and maybe had dementia, but you're living in the past, because as we know, people that have Alzheimer's, for instance, they forget more recent things, but they hold on longer to those long-term memories, and they live in the past a lot. And if they were to smell leather, for example, that might bring them some happiness.
Absolutely. It's I hate to be over dramatic, but it is magic. If you're that person that brings that one thing or provides that one sensory experience, you lit up their life just in that instant. And now, smell is not as strong a sense for people with Alzheimer's, because the studies are showing about 50% of them will have lost their sense of smell. Mm-hmm. So I'm always a little careful around the whole aromatherapy thing. That being said, if you brought a piece of leather, or if somebody had the experience, if I were working with someone like this who had grown up around horses, it would be worth my while to bring in a saddle, or to just make sure there were some good horse pictures. I mean, there's a range of ways to do that, in my Feathering Your Nest kit, because I do workshops where I take a whole kit and I have bags full of goodies that people have to root through and feel and experience. There's a bunch of wool. That's probably not what one calls it, but it's just sheared, and as you put your fingers in, you can feel the lanolin. And in certain parts of Maryland, at the Sheep and Wool Festival in Howard County, I mean, that brings back a whole plethora of experience, because they remember the shearing, they remember the lanolin, and it just lightens up. And, you can do and as an activities director, we did whole programs around these things. I mean, if I were going in and having, it was, say, March, and I wanted to do a large group, I would take a grab bag of things that remind people of spring. And they would pull something out, and then there'd be reminiscing about what they pulled out.
Yes, and
in one case, it was like a stuffed robin, not a real one, by the way. But I had this little lady who rarely shared. She was from Georgia, and I said, "Oh my gosh, when you see that robin and you touch that robin, what did you think of?" And she said, "Roasted on a spit." And I think. My perfect answer is, wow, tell me more.
Right.
Because I never thought of a robin that way. I'm thinking of Rockin' Robin and Red Robin and all these robin things. I wasn't thinking of eating them. Well, she grew up in Georgia, and they were really poor. And at spring, that was a really good thing. And 3 of them on a stick would make a meal.
Oh, wow.
So, wow.
Yeah, that is a wow.
Wow, yeah. I know.
You never know what you're going to get, so be careful.
You really don't.
Don't ask if you don't want the answers when you're talking with someone with dementia, because they will tell you.
Yes, but what a beautiful, there were 20 people in this circle, and she had the floor, and she just felt so good about that. And, I wrote it on the board and kept on moving afterwards. We had nests and, the traditional spring things. But so they don't feel like they're rocket science ideas. But these are ways, so many times families say, "I can't go see her anymore. She doesn't recognize me." And I understand where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. But this book can give them opportunities to move beyond that, to be the person that gets the wow. It's like,
and that's a great feeling, too.
Orchid. She loves orchids.
Right.
Yeah, if the orchid is the one, you can be the orchid person. And for a moment, you've had a connection that you will not have the next moment.
Right, and you bring joy to both her and to yourself, because you bring happiness and you're sharing that moment together. And she might not remember that you're the niece, but you know that you made her happy, and that's a good feeling.
Yes. And I guess from a caregiving point of view, because I did caregiving in the home with my one father-in-law, and there were many people who just couldn't come see Dad like that. Please come and do just one thing. Just lighten his world for a minute, please. Because what I wanted to say to them, it's not about you anymore. It's about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a hard pill to swallow.
Right.
And it's a hard pill to present.
Right.
But I think caregivers listening might understand what I'm saying.
Well, we have to get into their world, because unfortunately they can't really function the way they used to in our world. So we have to learn what triggers their memories, and we have to learn what we can do to help them so that we can still connect with them. And that's what it's all about, is connecting on some level. And, with the senses, that's a great way to do it. It reminds me of pet therapy, which is more of a visual thing too, or a touch thing.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we had a gentleman just not too long ago when we had pet therapy visiting at Arden Courts, and it was different dogs. And the one dog that this one gentleman definitely connected with was, a big yellow dog. He didn't care so much about the little black and white dog that was there, but when the big yellow dog came over and he got to pet that dog, he just cried with, I don't want to say he was sad, but he cried because he was remembering something. And his wife said, we used to have a big yellow dog like this. And this is bringing back memories. And it was really special to see this gentleman just really love to pet that dog and have that dog and reminisce about all the good times that he had with his dog. And, something like that is
wonderful.
awesome.
Yeah, to bring back, because you're the vehicle for bringing back a memory with whatever you bring forth. And again, if we look at behaviors, often they are triggered by a sensory response.
So this is a way for caregivers to learn to have up front, before they really need to have it, all this information about special events and favorite flowers and favorite colors and favorite experiences.
And there are some universals, and I talk about that in the book, universal preferences. I like to think that everybody in the world loves chocolate ice cream. But if you're not the one, then my giving your pills and chocolate ice cream is not going to work. So it would be nice to know that you only like vanilla.
Well, Dr. Kate, you can give me my pills anytime in chocolate ice cream.
Okay, good. Me too. That's the way I feel. But every once in a while, you run into someone who doesn't like that, and you're like, oh, had I known that, had we known.
If you'd known that strawberry was the favorite, they're going to take their pills a whole lot easier.
Right. I mean, even caregivers will say, I tried Ensure. And I say, well, what flavor? Did you try all the flavors? Because it might just be that one.
See?
That they don't like.
So you have to, it's like trial and error sometimes.
It is. And it's much easier to do when you're not the caregiver. That's the primary caregiver. So I really like to get families involved in using the work, because it takes a village. It really does. To make a full-bodied life, to go from survival to thriving, no matter where one lives, it takes a whole lot of people. It's not just a one-person job.
Right. And by writing things down like this in the workbook, then you're sharing it, and you can share it with other family members and friends who come that might say, oh, I didn't know that, but I can help with this memory, or I can help make that happen for this person. And it really gives them a chance to not only get to know the person better, but to be able to be part of that person's moment while they're there to connect with them, which I think is awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. And what are some of the other senses that you mentioned?
Well, we have the spiritual sense, and I find that's really important, particularly as people. I find that, the research actually supports the importance of spirituality for both the care duo, so the caregiver as well as the person who's living with dementia. And spirituality may be as simple as I need to be outdoors, which is, of course, one of the things I love about Arden Courts is that I can do that fairly easily without too much thought or processing that I can't just walk outdoors.
Right.
Because spirituality is a broad term, and it means a lot of things for a lot of different people. But I think it's important that if my spirituality is a menorah at this time of year, then I need everyone around me to know that, and that perhaps the manger scene is really not working for me.
Right.
In fact, it might make me feel like I'm not left out, or I'm less than, or somehow being isolated. And there's so much sensitivity involved that I think we as a culture forget, and particularly when there's this inability to communicate. And I don't mean, in this case, this wouldn't be depression, but it would be Alzheimer's, Lewy bodies, the language variant of frontal temporal, where I'm not able to tell you that this is offensive, or I'm not able to tell you that I'm feeling bad and I'm going to stay in my room, and I might do that for the next 18 days based on what you've decorated my living space with.
See, yeah, you just don't know. So you got to be like a detective to find the clues. And I love what you said about the spiritual component, because you actually wrote a whole book on spirituality and caregiving. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Dr. Kate's other book on spirituality and caregiving, Graceful Alzheimer's Care. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Wandering is a common problem for people with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's also a problem for family members who care for them. Keeping them safe and secure means never letting your guard down. And even though deep down you know it's time, it hurts to have to ask for help. But it could hurt them even more if you didn't. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know. We understand. We can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
Info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're back, and I'd like to thank our newest local sponsor, Right at Home Home Care. You need someone at home to help you take care of someone, and you are afraid to leave them alone while you go out. You need some help getting them in and out of the shower. Whatever you might need at home, you can call Right at Home. Their telephone number is 561-910-1843. 561-910-1843, Right at Home. Whether you're in Palm Beach or Broward County, they will make you feel right at home. So give them a call. I'd also like to thank Arden Courts. Arden Courts is our national sponsor, and Arden Courts is memory care communities throughout the United States. Matter of fact, about 52 communities. And they are expert in taking care of not only a person with dementia, but also the caregiver. And as such, they would like to offer you this free book. This is called the 36-Hour Day book. It is an awesome book for caregivers. If you do not have this book on your shelf, then Arden Courts would like for you to call them, and they want to send it to you absolutely free so that you can learn more about caregiving, more about the disease of Alzheimer's and other related dementia, and learn about coping tips and things that maybe will help you a little bit better along your caregiving journey. All you have to do is call their toll-free number to get this book, and that number is 888-478-2410. Again, 888-478-2410. Let them know that you heard about this offer on the Caregiver Solutions Info Show, and they'll be happy to get your name and address and make sure they get one out to you. So we're on the telephone now with Dr. Kate McCarty. Dr. Kate is actually a specialist in geriatrics and dementia and the process of aging, and she's sharing with us about 2 books that she's written to help caregivers. One's called Feathering Your Nest, and the other one is on spirituality, and that's what we want to talk about right now. Dr. Kate, tell us about how spirituality works with caregiving, and tell us about this book that you wrote.
Yes, I learned early on as a really in the nurse's aid world that, I was only 16, but how important spirituality was, and it was because they gave me a dying patient, and and I remember her name. They say when there's a significant memory in your life, you'll remember the person's full name, etc. And I totally do, and I think of her often when I speak. But it was so important to me because I had a 12-hour shift, and I only had one patient, and I had no idea what to do, except I knew that there should be probably something spiritual involved. And then through time and more evidence, and I actually, as an activities director, surprisingly, I was at an awful lot of deathbeds. And part of that is because I was in skilled nursing, and there's a certain requirement of activity provision no matter where you are in life spectrum. And so I had to learn how to be with people who were no longer communicating, no longer responding with facial affect or anything. And spirituality was a part of that. So if I knew they were Catholic, then I could go in and do the rosary and hold a hand, and then it would be 15 minutes, and I felt like I had done something useful that I could document, which is all part of the activities director in a skilled nursing center. But flash forward, and when I look at caregiving research, it's really key to my favorite study is called Alzheimer's Caregivers, and it's about sustaining self, how to sustain yourself. And there's 3 items, and one was seeking help, which we are, and I say this as we, because I am a caregiver as well, we are classically bad at seeking help. We don't. We think we can do it ourselves, and we don't reach out. And when we do reach out, we reach out for the thing that we should have done about 3 months ago. We're always late on that because there's some denial, and there's, I can do it. And sometimes we use spirituality to say, I can do it. It makes me think of that classic story where the man, gets to heaven, and he said, God, why did you let me drown? And he says something like, I sent you 3 different rescue modality, I sent you 3 different things and you ignored them all.
Yeah, I sent you the boat, I sent you a helicopter, I sent you the life preserver, and
that's a typical caregiver, and sometimes it's because we don't know what we need. Like there might be a boat and we're in denial. Like, no, I will never place him. No, I'm not going to do that. But that's the boat. That's the cruise liner that you're just letting go by.
There went an opportunity.
Sometimes we forget.
Yeah.
Yes. So seeking help, getting education, which is why I love to get seminars, why I like to seek it. That's number 2 is seeking education, seeking help, getting education. And the third piece was spirituality, which it was not a spiritual journal, but it was what people said was important to their walk as a caregiver. And I thought that was pretty profound out of those 3, that was right up there. But I always remember there are no atheists in foxholes. And I'm telling you, this is caregiving. I realize it's not just a foxhole. I mean, sometimes you're on the front line.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you got to have something, some sort of backup. And if it's a quiet walk, or if it's whatever it is, if it's a meditation practice, a really good book that I read for free on Kindle one time, Mindfulness for Alzheimer's Caregivers. It wasn't all great, but a lot of it was really useful, and I actually integrate some of that into my life and into my seminars because it spoke to me, things that we can do to help. And I was actually cruising in the Bahamas. We had sold everything, and we went and retired early, and we went and lived on our boat and cruised through the Caribbean. And I wrote Graceful Alzheimer's Care, the Church's Call to Action. And it's a Bible study, and I say that cautiously because I've also done several Old Testament things for Rosh Hashanah, etc., based on the same concept. So I have mostly Old Testament scripture that I use in it. But from my experience, I have found, and I've heard many, many stories that are very sad, the church is really paralyzed in the face of Alzheimer's. It is as if it's the modern day leprosy, and we have no idea what to do, and a casserole doesn't cut it, and unfortunately most churches aren't even giving casseroles anymore.
Yeah, because it wasn't store-bought.
Right, exactly. So if you go online and you look for churches that are involved in Alzheimer's care, I think out of a nation of how many people, there are 4 churches that may have something going on. I'm blessed to be a part of one nearby that does once a week. They have an adult day on Tuesdays, and that's a phenomenal gift. And the church has totally supported it, and it's grant driven, and it's nonprofit, et cetera, et cetera. But as the body of Christ, we've been very bad at this. We're much better at going to Haiti and getting the T-shirt and raising the money and having the pictures to put on Facebook.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think Alzheimer's is, shunned by the church and other things aren't? Do you think it's just because it has a stigma attached to it?
I know there's a stigma. That's documented in research and, of course, plenty of evidence. But I think more importantly that it's much easier to do a distant mission than it is to have one in your own backyard or in your pew. I do think there's a lot of ageism in our world. I think that's really alive and well, ageism, which is all part of our societal view of things. And I think in our effort to, I try not to really piss off too many church people, but we're so busy trying to meet the need of this little tiny group of teenagers or young adults that we're missing that the people that are funding this and have been funding us for like generations are slipping away because they can't come anymore.
Right. They can't come, and now they're isolated, a lot of them.
Yes. And why is it, and we lived this. My father-in-law was the head of the parish council. He was on the new church committee. He was a mover and a shaker. And the first time he put the host in his pocket, Mom was never taking him again because certainly that was not appropriate, and she could not trust him to go to Mass anymore. And nobody was going to talk her out of it. But as a church, we could have said that probably Jesus would forgive him. Right?
Yeah. So
and maybe we would present the host in a different way for him. Maybe that would be a trick. Maybe that would be something we could redirect how that went.
Right, because the church,
instead,
the church and the temple.
Had gone to,
I was just going to say the church and the temple can be another support system for the person, for the caregiver also, if they knew what to do and how to do it. Yes,
and I am very committed to somehow helping make that happen. I've had a couple seminars up here, 3-4 hour seminars, but I would love to meet with churches, temples, whatever, to sort of get to the point where we can learn how to do this, because it's not rocket science. It can be so beautiful, such a beautiful experience. It can come in so many different ways. It could be a special needs kind of class. It could be somebody going out to the house so the wife gets to church. There's so many ways this could look.
Right. So many ways
to cut people off when they need it the most. That's just
absolutely
really painful.
Absolutely.
And these were the pillars of the, we talk about the church dying. Well, these are the people that were the pillars when you're looking at the 80 and 90-year-olds.
Right.
And so, yeah, doing a lot of speaking on that, and that's been good. And so much of the Old Testament speaks to it. And what's interesting, Church's Call to Action is the subtitle. It's Graceful Alzheimer's Care, the Church's Call to Action. I was very moved by the story of Esther. The reason I know the story of Esther was because I worked with people who were Jewish. And back in Maryland in 96, 98, out Arden Courts of Kensington, I was the program services, the activities person. As a mostly Jewish population. So I quickly learned how to make challah. I learned what I needed to do to make their life enriched. And, of course, Purim is a delightful time of year with the whole carnival and the reading, and I've managed to do that so many times. And what I love about the story of Esther is she says, but why me? Or,
why not?
Her uncle says, why do you think you were put there? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
why not? Why not?
Right? Exactly.
Right.
So,
well, I think
it has a lot of roots in multiculturalism. And at that time, I also was working in a home with a Hindu lady, and I learned about the festival of Diwali. And we share a lot more. We have to look at what we share in these cases.
Yes, and the traditions of each person is so important to them. And that spirituality that you're talking about is not only for the caregivers to cope, but the spirituality portion is so important to the person with dementia, too, because, they reminisce and they like those traditions that they can think about. And when they're singing the old hymns or they're sitting in a modified, and I'll call it a modified service, maybe for Shabbat or something like that, where they can get the feeling of the service. It might not be as long and it might not be as detailed as it once was for them because of their attention span or whatever, but they really do get a lot out of it because they can recite the prayers. People like to sing the songs. And that, again, that spirituality portion does bring that person with dementia comfort as well as to the caregiver.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very important. So,
classic. Years ago, Arden Court sent me to a training with Naomi File. Fascinating, wonderful woman. And it was the validation approach, and she's written books, and there's several good ones. But she has a YouTube video of her, and Naomi File's Jewish, and she's working with a woman in very late-stage dementia, and she's singing Jesus Loves Me. And the woman ends up speaking, a nonverbal woman ends up singing with her. And it's like a 4-minute video, and it brings everyone to tears but that's how it works, folks. That's how it works. We have to meet them where they are. And what did they learn long ago? And, I have a song that I learned from my father-in-law who had Alzheimer's. And it was, I love you, a bushel and a peck and a hug around the neck.
Yeah.
Well, I'm passing it forward because Quinn on the picture, I sing that to her whenever we video chat, and she just smiles all over herself. And now, because she's almost 2, she says, about you. She always joins in, about you.
Yep, and she'll have that as a memory, and when she gets older, someone's going to write that in your workbook.
We can only hope somebody's going to remember that.
Someone's going to remember that
sure
because
she's the only one in preschool is going to know that song.
That's right. We're going to take our last commercial break right now, and when we come back, we'll finish up with Dr. Kate and get her pearls of wisdom before we close today. So we'll be right back.
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Wandering is a common problem for people with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's also a problem for family members who care for them. Keeping them safe and secure means never letting your guard down. And even though deep down you know it's time, it hurts to have to ask for help. but it could hurt them even more if you didn't. We know, we understand, we can help. Arden Courts. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts.
Question or wish to share a story? Call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're back, and I'm chatting with Dr. Kate. Dr. Kate has a PhD in aging studies with a focus on dementia, and she's a dementia coach, and she helps caregivers. And one way she helps caregivers is she does speaking engagements, she does one-on-one coaching, and she actually has written a couple books for caregivers based upon her experiences and her education and her knowledge. So thank you again, Dr. Kate, for joining us today. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Okay, you are calling in
good.
all the way
Thank
from
you.
Tampa. So thank you for joining us today. Your knowledge is phenomenal. What you have to say to help caregivers find joy in the journey. We've been talking about things that caregivers can do to help find joy, not only for their loved one, but for themselves. And then also about the spirituality portion of caregiving. And I think both of these topics are really, really good to discuss because I don't think that we talk enough about these things to help caregivers. So before we close today, I'd like to ask you to give us a couple words, a couple pearls of wisdom to tell caregivers maybe from your heart what you would impart upon them as we close our talk today.
I think I have been academically trained, so I have to go back to the research. And a couple key points: seeking help sooner than later, whatever that looks like, whatever piece of help you'll allow into your life, go ahead and seek that now. And that might be taking a deep breath. It might be that simple. It might be reaching out to Marcia, reaching out to me, reaching out to someone to say, help. And you may not want what we have, whoever it is you turn to, but definitely reach out because it is not a situation where you can really do it alone. So vital that people reach out and seek other people's help. The other piece of research that just came across my screen, my mental screen, is that often we judge much harder what we think a caregiver is experiencing than the reality. So they were looking at quality of life, and often we are much harder on a situation or on the perfect circumstance. We think it needs to be better. And in reality, our loved one is actually quite comfortable with what they have and what's going on. And I think it's an important thing because we tend to be very critical of ourselves. And we need to let ourselves off the hook a little bit. It's not as bad as you might think it is. And again, that's, validated research to help with that. And that we have to take care of ourselves because there's no water in an empty well. And that's really hard to do because our primary focus is trying to figure out how to get through the day with him or her. But really, we have to take care of ourselves first because we are the front line, and we can seek ancillary help. But no matter where our loved one lives, we are the primary advocate to make sure that everything's getting done. So
right.
The percentages of caregivers that die before their loved one are horrifying. The stress level is through the roof. It's a vigilance of a newborn baby, but it lasts for 10 or 20 years. That's a horrifying kind of amount of stress. So we have to seek help in order to take care of ourselves.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kate. Can you give us a quick phone number or a way to reach you if someone would like to use your services?
Yes, it's 813-384-7571. And my website is Kate, CateMCCARTY.com.
Okay, so you heard it from Dr. Kate here on Caregiver Solutions Info. I want to thank everyone for tuning in this evening to watch this show. And don't forget, we'll be same place, same time next week. And in the meantime, give someone a hug because they need it, and so do you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and